Now, let's shift gears to the playground. There was a lot of concentration here. As you can see, there was a real preference for the option B. We did have a couple votes, and maybe it's too black and white to just say no, but there was, I think, some preference for no change at all, just keep it the way it is. And there was another option that was offered. I think it was this table, and I don't know. Can you talk to this a little bit, Ron?
Well, one observation I had after seeing it was that the E7 that we got here is actually has a lot of similarities to B. It's a variation on a theme.
I think like the architect can incorporate ideas like what we just show them to the folks. This is one in Jacksonville. It's more user-friendly colors, but the kids love it. It's one that we've seen that the kids just have a wonderful time with. But I think the architect can work on that one.
Yeah, the common thread there is that it's a natural wood product, which B was.
I don't know.
It's plastic.
Oh, that's all plastic?
It's plastic because the wood, they get splinters on. And I've heard so many comments about splinters in kids, and you've got to use these new plastic and composite materials, and it works. Yeah.
Well, it does have a wood look, yeah.
It's a wood look. You can't tell it apart, but
yeah.
So, John, do you have anything more to say about option?
No, I think that one was pretty cut and dried. I think that was pretty predictable.
One of the things that I've seen is where you have that composite stuff on the ground, rather than have hard ground, there's a soft composite thing, and it looks like that's under A.
A, yeah.
Yeah, that's a common tendency in playground areas now, just to reduce injuries and that sort of thing.
Just a footnote, our table always, when we said natural, and we voted for natural, it seems, on every time we had an opportunity to, rather than, bright plastics, et cetera. We typically said consider composite modern materials to look natural. But also, one person at our table immediately went to C, but the thinking of that person wasn't necessarily materials. It looked at the picture and it looked like it was low and safety was an issue. So she was thinking about young children and she immediately saw a higher playground as something for a very young child as being dangerous. So that's why she initially went that direction.
Okay, well, Bill?
In our group was that we saw the entire park as a playground. Obviously, a playground normally denotes equipment like the slides and swings, etc. But we saw that the park itself is a playground, and that ought to be kept primarily as a playground and natural site and a playground.
And also, we like very much the little toddler lot for the real little kids that's shown on John's drawing, and then Carolyn and others thought about putting some educational or ecological, like creatures or statues or things like that for little kids.
Okay, well, that whole area of the playground is a good segue in the comments here because we talked about the need for the park to be multi-generational. And so this playground concept, you might say it's 9 years and under, the types of things that would be in there. And that leads us into this multi-purpose court, So is there some way we can appeal to a little older group, maybe sub-teens and early teens? And here we had, again, a pretty clear concentration on option A, but there were a lot of comments on these worksheets, about that. So, let's open it up for some discussion.
I would only, it needs to be very big, or there's going to be a lot of struggle over what goes on that court. And at our table, we had 5 different things that ended up being on that court, and that court would have to be a lot bigger, I think, than it currently is.
We felt that a full-size court was unnecessary. Half court was really all they would need for basketball, for God's sakes. And the other half could be to the other things that we talked about.
Well, we felt the same way, but you can put sleeves in there for volleyball on one end. You can put a sleeve in for badminton. You can put a sleeve in for tetherball. You can have 4 square painted on one end and we agree with you very much. You only need half the court for basketball. But the kids do like, we go out there, they like to ride their tricycles and little bikes around that court.
There was a comment at our table that the Boys and Girls Club downtown put in a brand-new multi-purpose court, and that it's very nice. And while we wouldn't do the same thing, we can go over and look at that for inspiration.
Okay, was any more comment? I know, oh, is it Annette? You know,
One of the things we noticed that option B was strictly gray-haired people. And, you know, I'd like to think about the fact that we should orient to family organized things as activities also, and not just focus on one particular age group. Because I do feel that we are a community that shares with either their grandchildren or their children, and I think that is something that we should consider. So anybody can play shuffleboard. You don't have to have gray hair to play shuffleboard or petanque. So the same is true with many of the other sports. So let's not move away from something that looks like it's strictly generational. Let's look at a concept that may be appealing to a broader age group.
it's a good point. Patrick here, Patrick, we'll come to you, and then we'll get Jeff.
We wanted people to bring their own balls and their own equipment. We have a hopscotch painted there. We have a shuffleboard painted there, but you bring your own equipment to play horseshoes, a petanque, bocce, or whatever.
And Jeff.
We kind of bounced around in our group between, I think, mostly A and C, but the one thing we didn't want, we want to make sure that this is open and there's no fencing around it. The concept of fencing would be very out of shape with the whole natural environment.
Okay, now so let's then shift to the gazebos and sun shelters, and we do have a concentration on A and B. B might be a little hard for you to see. Was that not in color?
No, the B was a black and white version. Ironically, B was the one, the sketch that I gave the committee for Drummond Park, which is flattering. A is a traditional, that was clear to see that A was a traditional roofed gazebo. B was a little hard to tell, but it was designed to be either a roof element or an arbor element as desired, and it could be placed in multiple spots. But the basic feel, B is a little more stylized. Again, looking at the image that's out there, A is a very traditional gazebo that you'd see in a historic park. B is a little more of a stylized, and again, I'd use the term organic kind of thing where we do plant jasmine and it becomes sort of a garden element and not just a structure. So it's part of the landscape. So I'm encouraged. I was pleased to see B was the slight leader there.
Perhaps incorporating both of them. We were A, but don't paint it.
Okay, we ended up in the same place.
We sort of gravitated to B as well, but we did it for another reason. We thought whatever the structure would be, might make sense to have it of the same style as the pavilion. That is, whatever we decide that the pavilion theme is, then that might be carried over to the structure as well.
We did also gravitate towards B, but we basically also added that roof was necessary. It should be no steps involved, and seats should be available inside, benches or seats.
Benches were planned on both sides, actually. Get one over here, Joe. Yeah.
That's pretty much where we were too. We like the roof in A, the natural look in B, and the benches in D.
So there.
Got it.
Our group discussed briefly, looking at all these options, as to whether, in fact, if we were to have a pavilion, do we also need gazebos? Are you really having almost too much in the property at that point? Maybe you have a couple of gazebos with shelter from the rain and not have the pavilion. So,
Where were the gazebos positioned?
Yeah. The gazebos were placed, and the reason they were placed was twofold. One was the gazebo was seen as an entry statement to the park. So as a transition from parking to the park, that was the gateway, which I think is a pretty nice visual experience, and it denotes when you pull up in the parking lot, you know where the entrance is. There's a visual signal. You don't have to put a sign there. If you got to put signs there, you didn't do a good job of designing it, is the way I look at it. So that is the sign. And it's green, and it has jasmine and that kind of thing growing on it. The other thing is, as you know around here, we have a tendency to get some fairly unexpected thunderstorms. And when you're out wandering around these paths and a sudden storm comes up, are you going to dash back to the pavilion, or are you going to duck into a gazebo?
All right.
That was the theory. And some people, like, for instance, at the adolescent playground area, and we did have two playground areas too. One was young children and one was adolescent. At the adolescent area, which is a little more comprehensive, again, it's nice for somebody to be able to sit down, a grandparent, a parent, sit down in the bench, in the gazebo while the kids are playing, that kind of thing. So it was a convenience and a protection from sun and from the elements. But it doesn't have to be there. Again,
All
that's
right.
what we're here for.
One more.
Somewhat in your, the same vein at your table, our table discussed whether or not there was a need for gazebos rather than just have strategically placed benches throughout the property. And we did talk about that quite a bit as far as what the need were. And I could see the use of both and maybe the limited amount of gazebos versus a lot of them scattered around the property and more benches. So another way to provide place to sit and maybe be away from another group who might be at the pavilion.